Well, welcome back to our second panel discussion of the day as part of the EU Cloud Compliance Summit, brought to you by the EU Cloud Code of Conduct General Assembly alongside Scope Europe. We've had quite a busy morning so far, but we've still got another panel for you before we close for lunch. And as part of this discussion, we'll be exploring how the adoption process of the EU Cloud COC has impacted cloud service providers and their everyday activities, and we'll also seek to explore a bit further the monitoring concept behind the code. For this cause, we are very pleased indeed to be joined by Peter Shah, former German Federal Commissioner for Data Protection.
Hello.
We have Natalie Ray, Head of Data Governance at Europe, Middle East and Asia at Google Cloud. We have Barbara Cosgrove, Vice President, Chief Privacy Officer of Workday, Joe Cropping, Senior Director, Privacy, Europe, Middle East and Asia of Salesforce, and Matthias Salarius, Head of SAP Data Protection and Privacy. So, transitioning perhaps from our Head of SAP Data Protection and Privacy. So, transitioning perhaps from our first panel discussion straight in to the subject of this second panel. Peter, I'd like to turn to you first. And during our first round of discussions, Jorn explained to us very well how the mechanism of a monitoring body performs and what are the main benefits it generates in comparison to alternative instruments. Now, you were closely engaged in the design of this monitoring concept. Can you explain to us what was the motivation behind this process in particular, and what makes this approach unique?
Well, the motivation of the industry is clear, that the industry must have instruments to demonstrate compliance with the requirements of the GDPR. And the codes of conduct are a kind of intermediate level that is between the company's activities and the independent supervision by the DPAs. So if a company demonstrates its adherence with the code, it in the same time demonstrates its compliance with the requirements of the GDPR. And this is very helpful because if the company can demonstrate or has joined this COC with and the organizational and legal framework, it can also use this fact to create trust for their customers and trust for the individuals which are concerned, and trust in reference to the DPAs. And it was a very challenging approach to create a mechanism that not only would be applicable to a specific code of conduct, but also for other codes of conduct. So this is the first code of conduct that is basing on this approach, but it will not be the last code of conduct. And so the unique selling point of this approach is not only that this is the first COC for the trans-European data transfer and the data transfer from Europe to other parts of the world, but also it will make it possible to come to other codes of conduct using the same mechanisms and to in a very high speed. So if we have this model of COC, or we take this model for other sectors, it will not take a lot of years as before to come to solutions that will be adopted by the DPAs on the national and on the European level.
Okay, thank you, Peter. I understand you're in Italy at the moment, and I'm incredibly jealous of your backdrop there. It doesn't compare very well to where we are in Brussels at the moment, but it looks beautiful wherever you are. So it's, well, I think the best backdrop we've seen today.
Italy, it's Italy.
Absolutely. Natalie Ray from Google Cloud, I'd like to come on to you now. Now, Google, obviously being a huge global player on the CSP market, was an early adopter of the EU Cloud COC. Perhaps you can give us some insights into why you put so many resources into this particular initiative.
Thanks, Samuel, and good morning, everybody. Well, today marks a major milestone for the cloud industry and European privacy, and it's such a privilege to share the stage with many of the driving forces behind the success of this initiative. I'm, of course, honored to represent Google as one of the first cloud providers to support the code many years ago and to already comply with the code. I think there was a number of good reasons why we decided to support the code. So first, we believe that the code is an excellent instrument to promote trust in the cloud by providing two elements, and these two are transparency and accountability. On the one hand, you get detailed data protection practices for an industry. This is sub-processors, portability, what happens after contract termination, security, physical security, logical security, and personal security. So in that sense, so privacy in the cloud is not a black box, but you know what to expect. On the other hand, it can be a tool, as Peter said before, for cloud providers to demonstrate compliance in line with Article 28. But it can be also a tool for customers to demonstrate compliance to their own customers and auditors and supervisory authorities. So there's the value of it. Then the second reason is we're absolutely committed to helping our customers navigate their compliance journey when using our services. So in this sense, we do think that codes definitely make a difference in facilitating their risk assessment tremendously when they are planning this migration or move to the cloud. And then last but not least, we do believe these are very important collaboration instruments for the cloud industry and data protection authorities. You can really find practical ways to operationalize stringent GDPR data protection requirements in the context of an industry. Think about audit rights, for example. So GDPR provides for unlimited audit rights for data controllers over data processors. Now, in reality, many of the cloud services are intended to scale to millions of customers. Now, all of those customers, of course, have the same rights. How do you possibly operationalize that without undermining security? It's obviously not a good idea to have hundreds of people working around a data center. So you can really sit together, think about creative solutions to meet stringent data protection requirements and still avoid unintended consequences. Make it practical. So those were the main reasons behind this support for the code.
Okay, thanks, Natalie. And I just wanted to follow up on one of the points you made there with regards to trust and confidence. How much do you envisage that the code will be a market driver in terms of fostering trust from cloud users and end users themselves at a time when confidence in these areas isn't the highest it could be?
Yeah, that's a great question. I don't think this tool is going to move the needle, and especially we can think of SMBs and companies that do not normally have huge compliance or legal resources to conduct detailed risk assessment or exhaustive data protection impact assessment. So we have a tool that is creating an operationalization model in the context of the cloud, and you can get a detailed, because Article 28 is very generic, so you can get a detailed model. Then that detailed model has been verified and endorsed by data protection authorities. So you get legal certainty, and also you get a proof of compliance. So for those involved in compliance work, we know that it is very important to do your job, but it's most important to make sure that you can demonstrate that you've done your job. So I think in this sense, we're gonna facilitate cloud adoption in a very significant way, and all customers from big to heavily regulated to small customers benefit, but the ones that will really appreciate having a ready-to-go tool, in my opinion, are SMBs.
Mm-hmm. Okay, great. Thank you, Natalie. Yes, legal certainty and demonstrable compliance do seem to be two key ingredients in fostering confidence here in the code itself. Barbara Cosgrove, Workday, I'd like to turn to you now. And we know that Workday, Barbara, was the first to declare services adherent to the EU Cloud COC version that was submitted for official approval by the authorities recently. And Workday itself has committed significant resources to the development of this project generally. Can you tell us how Workday itself benefits from the code?
Sure. Maybe I can start with a real quick description of what Workday is, to help give some context. We're a leading provider of cloud applications for financial management, human resources planning, spend management, and analytics. And our cloud solutions have been adopted by thousands of organizations globally across industries. So similar to what we're hearing from other folks, safeguarding privacy of our customers' personal data, some of their most sensitive data is top of mind for us. Security and privacy are core to what we do. And so we were trying to look at ways where we can continue to demonstrate data protection compliance for our customers. And that was when we initially joined in early 2018. And we saw the Cloud Code of Conduct is really a way to make it much easier, more transparent. Again, I'm repeating things you've already heard here. For a way for our customers to really analyze cloud services data protection compliance. We also saw it as a great way to engage with policymakers, companies who are trying to really work together to create a better, more trusted future for all cloud companies. And we really wanted to be involved with this code specifically because of the broad nature of the cloud services that it covers, that it wasn't focused on just one type, that it really had a broad nature. And so, you know, as a cloud provider, we continue to look for innovative ways to demonstrate to our customers that we meet our obligations. We think, again, that you must have that trust but verify approach. And we have binding corporate rules for processors. We use that as a data transfer mechanism along with other mechanisms. But we really thought the code of conduct was a unique mechanism under GDPR, where in addition to having a contractual mechanism, you were able to tie it to these much more detailed audits and monitoring. And we know our customers under GDPR have an obligation to do this monitoring and to have insight into it. And we had tried to do mappings in our SOC audits. We had tried to, you know, leverage ISO, but we saw this code as really being able to pull together a more comprehensive mapping, pointing to contractual provisions, pointing to third-party audit controls, and being able to put it all in one place that pulled together all of the different mechanisms under GDPR. So we really thought it was a worthwhile effort to devote the resources to help work with our other industry partners here in getting this over the finish line. And we're very excited to see the finalization about it, and really think it's going to, you know, help us demonstrate to our customers that we're contributing to an environment of trust and that we're continuing to drive strong privacy practices in the cloud computing market. Sorry, I
Great.
don't have the beautiful background as some of the others. It's a little bit later here.
We can but dream, Barbara, we can but dream. Very interesting to hear there how the code has, I suppose, in many ways organically satisfied your requirements as a cloud service provider against other initiatives at play there. And I think it would also be interesting to explore how the code has already helped to influence privacy protocols and privacy programs in organizations themselves. And for this, I'd like to turn to Joe Copping of Salesforce. And of course, Salesforce as well was an earlier supporter of the EU Cloud Code of Conduct. And Joe, I wonder if you can share what were the key motivations that drove you to onboard this initiative in the first place? And can you tell us about these synergies between the code itself and your own privacy program? We can't hear you at the moment, so I think you need to turn your mic on, Joe. Still nothing? No. Perhaps we can come back to Joe in a moment. I'd like to bring in Matthias Salarius here from SAP while we wait for Joe to perhaps fix the microphone issue there. And Matthias, I mean, speaking more generally about the many co-regulatory initiatives that have been developed recently in this landscape, especially at the EU level, how does the EU Cloud COC fit into this picture? And what are the advantages that it offers perhaps over alternative approaches? Matthias.
Yeah, thank you very much for having me here on a very late good morning to everyone. I'm very pleased to be on this panel today and to represent SAP in what I believe is a truly historic moment, because that gets back to your question. It's not just one code of conduct, it's the code of conduct, as I would put it. It's the first code that's been fully acknowledged by the European Data Protection Board, and it's operational as of today. I think that's the big difference. And as Peter Shah put it first, it's a role model for other codes of conduct. So it's a lighthouse project, and it'll be something that will transform the entire industry, from what all of our customers, joint customers, then can benefit from. And it's the first of its kind. It's going to be the scale for others, and I'm convinced it'll be a great success.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you very much, Matthias, there for your response. I wonder if we have managed to fix Joe's microphone as yet. Doesn't appear like we have done, so we'll keep working at that. But in the meantime, Peter Shah, I'd like to turn back to you. And the development of this code will most likely require the ongoing fruitful dialogue between key stakeholders from the regulatory and industrial spheres. And in your opinion, what role should the European Data Protection Board and the national supervisory authorities themselves play in this context, and how should they work together?
Well, this process was governed by the idea that there should be a win-win situation. There are advantages for the companies, of course, but there are also advantages for the supervisory authorities. As everybody knows, the resources of the DPAs are very limited, and they cannot carry out audits on every single company and every single service. So it is a very good situation for the DPAs to understand that a COC may help them to carry out their tasks. The COC monitoring body is a key element of the adherence, or the demonstrating the adherence of those companies who have joined this COC. So if a DPA is setting up an audit plan, it takes into account whether a company, a controller as well as a processor, data processor, has joined such a COC and is underlying the supervisory and self-regulation procedures constituted by the code and the other documents constituting the framework of monitoring. And therefore, it might be a higher level of cooperation between the DPAs and the the companies, and the cloud also can help to assess the level of data protection that is guaranteed by those companies without a specific audit of the DPA.
Okay, thanks, Peter. And I just wanted to follow up on one quick point there. You referenced the broad nature of the code itself and the members as well, and the fact that for many players, their resources are limited. Do you think in the long term, this code will attract members perhaps who are larger in terms of their capacities, or do you think it will be more useful to smaller SMEs in Europe and beyond?
Well, this is an expectation. I think it is very helpful for the smaller and medium companies than it is for the big players, because big players have resources, but it also helps the big players. And those who are subject or who are members of this COC, many of them are big players, to be frank. So it is useful for SMEs as well as for big players, but as customers as well as members of the COC. As was said by other speakers, those companies who use service provided by a member of the COC demonstrate compliance, having Article 8 regulation. Requirements of the is resources.
Yes. Okay. We just lost you for a moment there, Peter, but hopefully your internet connection manages to hold up wherever you are in rural Italy at the moment. At least we're getting a good insight into the level of connectivity in the Mediterranean. Joe, I see that you've returned with us. Can we try your microphone a third time here?
Third time lucky. Does that this
There
work?
we go. Yes.
Yes. Thank you for your patience. Sorry about that.
No problem. So, yeah, maybe you can explicate for us the synergy between the code itself and your own privacy programs at Salesforce.
Absolutely. I mean, we've already heard a lot about trust today, and really, in a nutshell, that's what it is. So at Salesforce, well, perhaps I should start by, introducing who Salesforce really is. So we are a provider of enterprise cloud software, and our technology enables companies to connect with their customers. Founded in 1999, and we've been operating in Europe since 2000. So yeah, Salesforce trust is our #1 value. That for us means our customers' ability to rely on our privacy and security offerings, the performance of our products and services, and also transparency. Trust is kind of the bedrock of everything we do, and it's within our DNA, both in terms of our culture and our technology. So we've got a very comprehensive and transparent security program. We have ASIP Santé in France, C5 in Germany, and then 7510 in the Netherlands. And also, similar to Workday, we were the first enterprise software company to get approval from the European Data Protection Authorities for our binding corporate rules back in 2015. corporate rules for processes. So in terms of the synergy between the code and our program, as I said, it's really driven by the same commitment to trust, and that's why we were very proud to be among the founding members of this code. So we recently declared our adherence to the code and are working with Scope Europe on our certification at the moment.
Okay, thank you very much, Jo, and it's good to hear that your microphone is working perfectly now. Thanks for your comments there. Natalie Ray at Google, I'd like to turn back to you now on the subject of perhaps fostering better protection of data subjects' rights as part of the code. And as you mentioned earlier, of course, it's crucial that customers develop some sort of a sense of confidence in a cloud service provider before they entrust them with their data and their applications. And from a CSP's perspective, I wonder if you believe codes of conduct such as the one we're talking about today can better support the protection of a data subject's rights generally.
Thank you, Samuel. Well, absolutely. I think there's been two elements mentioned that are super important. The first, this is the only code of conduct that is cutting across the 3 layers of services: infrastructure as a service, platform as a service, and software as a service. This is quite unique in the market, which makes this moment very significant. Then the other element is that normally our privacy programs are developed to scale globally. So the things that you do, the product changes, the engineering changes, many also of the contractual changes and the operational changes not only impact Europe, but they impact your services globally. So by virtue of adopting this code, you're raising the bar for the industry, and many times you're raising the bar for your compliance program globally. GDPR and European privacy is inspiring really what you do in other jurisdictions in other countries, as is the most stringent and the more detailed in the world. Now, going to the practical path and data subject rights, it definitely helps. The code establishes collaboration paths and how you as a cloud provider support the cloud customer or the data controller with dealing with data subject rights, processes about who to contact and what's the right channel to be contacted, and then what is going to happen. Are you redirecting that data subject to the customer? How you help the customer. There are a number of rights like data portability, data deletion, and the like, in which your technology as a cloud provider is absolutely key for the controller to fulfill those rights. So you're there supporting the customer with your technology and with your processes in order to make sure that that effectively happens in practice. So yes, the short answer is yes, definitely.
Mm-hmm. And of course, Natalie, your role at Google covers Europe, the Middle East, and Asia. And of course, as other jurisdictions worldwide progress on their own privacy legislations, do you think there will be other codes in the future that emerge for the cloud ecosystem in other jurisdictions all across the globe?
Well, certainly other jurisdictions have taken the European model as an inspiration in terms of the principles that govern data protection. And we're seeing some of the process, or many of the process of provisions inspired by GDPR and the previous directive. So definitely there is a trend there. And I do think that from international standards like ISO and codes of conduct like this are helpful to help operationalize those high-level principles into the state-of-the-art for an industry. So in that sense, for those jurisdictions and those countries that take inspiration from GDPR in terms of what is expected between a controller and a processor, and to the extent that looks similar to Article 28, I think that this successful and robust code of conduct could definitely serve as an inspiration.
Okay, thanks very much, Natalie, for your comments there. Barbara Cosgrove, I'd like to bring you back into the discussion now, and perhaps you can tell us a bit more about the actual implementation of the code's provisions for you at Workday. Were there supplementary measures, for example, that you had to specifically put in place to fulfill the code's requirement?
Sure. So as we went through our review and through the monitoring process and the adherence process, the reviews, we were able to leverage a lot of the existing controls we already had in place, whether it was in our SOC 2 audit, our ISO certifications, or our agreements. And so we didn't necessarily have to put anything brand new in place, but what we did find was that through the reviews, there were areas where we could make some improvements. We could make things clearer. We could make things more efficient. And I think those were definitely positive process improvements, because when I look at some of the conversations we were having with customers, where maybe we were having to discuss the same question over and over about a certain area of compliance, going through this monitoring activity and looking at what some of the underlying safeguards were in the control catalog, it helped us implement some process improvements and make the transparency around what we were doing clearer. So I wouldn't say there was anything brand new, but there was definitely process improvements along the way.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you very much. Corinne Pickard from Oracle, I can see you're with us here as well. I just wonder, what has your involvement in the EU Cloud COC been like? Obviously, you've been a member, I think, for quite a long time, and we referenced earlier the life of Joe Aldelef, who had contributed so much to the project itself. I wonder why you see this as a potential solution to fostering trust in the wider cloud ecosystem.
Yeah, it's been a long journey since December 2012, where we all been gathered under the European Commission to start this code. I think some people foreseen what cloud would become 10 years after. So we're very, very happy to be part of this harmonious approach. For us, it's very important because actually it's covering every layer of the technology that the customer adopted. So for this, it's a very valuable asset because as stated by Google, Workday, and Salesforce, when we develop our solution and services, if we have to think about meeting requirements and rules that are different from a solution perspective and a platform perspective, it's becoming very complex for us, but as well for the customer to understand really transparently the different rules. You know, if you have our customer already have multiple cloud in their landscape, you know, they have to manage multiple SLAs, and of course there will be interoperability of those clouds. So we have to simplify their life, and having IaaS, you know, like infrastructure as a service, platform as a service, and software as a service under one code is really an asset for the customer and for the provider like us, because we are covering all of these elements. So it would have been very complex for us to have to follow different codes. So for us, it's a very important approach as well. We think our customer already, know that we are following and committed to follow EU GDPR and ISO and SOC, but the code is really providing another layer of insurance for them, very transparent. And from a staff perspective, in our sense, operation and development perspective, it's really helped us to build proactively our solution and meet those requirements. So it's really cost savings and much more efficient from a customer and provider perspective. So it was no-brainer for us to actually participate to the elaboration of the code, and of course to at one point to sign off our services to the code. So that's pretty much why we participate. And we think I don't think it has been mentioned with my previous colleague, but the controls catalog, you know, which is mapping all the requirements between the code itself, GDPR, and all of the ISO rules and SOC and C5, is really helping our experts to leverage certification programs demanded by customer. So it's really simplifying our life internally and the life of our customer.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thanks, Corinne there. And I'd just like to follow up with you, Corinne, on one point, bearing in mind your deep involvement in the project itself. During the drafting process of the code, what were the key elements for Oracle that you believed had to be implemented in order for the code to be well aligned with your business model?
I think it's a bit of what I said, you know, the fact that it was just covering the entire cloud services. I think it was absolutely key for us as well to have an authority like Scope Europe that can monitor and drive continuous innovation of the code. I think someone said it's the first code, but it's not going to be the only one. But actually, it's an evolutive code. It's going to be cloud, and innovation is, you know, things are moving very fast. So we feel to have this authority to monitor the code and make it evolve in the right direction is really important. As well, we are very pleased that other security authority have been involved to reviewed and approved the code, like, for example, the French CNIL, but as well the Belgium Data Privacy Authority has been heavily involved. So the fact that all of those authority has been involved to approve it will drive transparency and trust, I think, from the other member of the EU community. And actually, for us, it was a key element to take into account.
Okay, thanks, Corinne. I just wanted to pick up on one point there you made. Perhaps I can turn this question to Joe Copping. But before I do, just a quick announcement to all of you tuning in at home. Please do send your questions through to us using the Q&A functionality on the platform, and we shall pick them up rather shortly. So, Joe, Corinne there referenced the importance of covering all existing service layers within the industry as part of the code. And this is quite an important aspect of the code itself. And I wonder, in this regard, Joe, do you think the code can be used as a comprehensive tool, providing guidelines for the development of future products, as well as products that we currently use?
Yeah, I mean, as we've already talked about, so the code is the only code that covers all three layers of the cloud, and that makes it a very unique proposition and a kind of a really all-encompassing solution. So the code does bring really an unprecedented level of certainty and coherence to the market, and it's a really robust tool of reference that can be used by cloud providers and cloud users alike to ensure that data protection standards really are high. So as the cloud providers, we get a robust tool that we can use to demonstrate our commitment to EU privacy principles and also to fundamental EU values. Salesforce has, of course, for a long time been very committed to complying with the GDPR, but I think, as Barbara said, this is just another way of us demonstrating that to our customers. And also it means that our customers and cloud customers generally have really quite solid principles that they know will be covered when they are purchasing certified services. So we find across Europe, European customers are obviously very highly sophisticated when it comes to their privacy and security requirements, and they have very high expectations in terms of what should be available, and the code really does meet these. And I think the really close cooperation between the industry and the data protection authorities in bringing this code to fruition has really means that it is like a very trusted compliance tool. And again, back to trust, this is what we've kind of created with this code. We've got a whole ecosystem with the code right at the center, and more trust leads to more cloud adoption, which leads to more efficiencies and ultimately more benefits for European customers, citizens, and also for the economy as a whole. I think it's important as well that it's a very flexible tool. So initially it was designed with the Data Protection Directive in mind, and then, as we heard earlier from, I think it was Jonathan, it was fine-tuned to meet the GDPR's requirements, and we may see further fine-tuning in the future, for example, with the data transfers module. Generally, really excited about the code. I think it's a great opportunity for everyone to demonstrate their commitment to trust and transparency in Europe.
Okay, thanks, Joe. And I just wanted to pick up very quickly there on the point you made about customers, and trust and confidence is something that they really expect as a default now in our current cloud ecosystem environment. And so far, what has the feedback been like from your customers, and has your involvement in the code been driven specifically by what your customers want, their demands, etc.?
I think our involvement in the code was driven. I mean, we've been involved, I think, for 7 years now, so it predates my time at Salesforce. Initially, our motivation for joining was that we saw it as a very kind of novel and innovative approach to co-regulation, which really was like a first for our industry and something that we thought would bring value to our company. It was, a great opportunity to demonstrate our commitment to our core values of trust and innovation, customer success, and to really take part in coming up with the creative solutions that Natalie mentioned earlier. Also, at the time, it was pre-GDPR, so it was really a way of, we thought, bringing some kind of harmonization to what at the time were some quite different privacy regimes, and to exchange best practice ideas with our other cloud service providers. So in terms of, we declared our adherence very recently, and we're still going through the certification process. So it hasn't been, we haven't had many customer queries about this at this stage. I think maybe Workday may be better to answer that question. But we really do see it as a really important tool that we can use to demonstrate to our customers how committed we are to complying with European requirements.
Thanks, Joe. Barbara, is this something you'd want to chime in on?
I can jump in on it. We definitely have had conversations with our customers about it, and it helps pull together that entire picture, like I was saying before. It helps not send them to 3 different documents to try to look at one place, to be able to have one mapping that we didn't do ourselves that's coming from an approved source. And that really, GDPR can be, complex, and trying to apply it to different cloud industries. Everybody starts to have different interpretations, and it's so detailed. And so having a place they can go to and have this controls catalog and have an overall one stop to take a look and be able to review has been really helpful. And then they can look at our other resources, and they can look at all of our audits and third-party certifications. But having one place that does that overall kind of mapping and expectation has been really helpful in the conversations.
Mm-hmm. Indeed. Matthias Solarius, I'd like to bring you in here, just in terms of the, I suppose, bigger picture with regards to the impact of the code to the European market. And of course, the code itself has been acknowledged by those in the data protection community as a market standard, really, for cloud services. And being a major European player yourself, how do you believe that this initiative will have a grander impact on overall European economic area market dynamics, as well as when it comes to ongoing digital policy initiatives all across the EU?
So there's 2 aspects, major aspects that I see to that. When you look at the digital policy initiatives, very clearly you see that their privacy is front and center in many of the initiatives that we are currently seeing. There's the Digital Government Act, Digital Services Act, just to name a few of them. And the code actually provides already some rules and some standards that have now been acknowledged by the regulators, as well as by major players in the industry as well. So this, you can say there are some questions that are solved already. And as such, this will have an impact also on the other initiatives. If you have already found a solution, be it from a content perspective, but also from a procedural perspective, this will be something that others will naturally pick up, and as such, it will have an impact. When you get to other industry initiatives or alliances, such as Gaia X, you will have the same kind of picture. And then when you see what it will have as an impact on the cloud market as a whole, I think it was mentioned by many of the panelists here before, there are customers who have very high demands when it gets to privacy standards. The Cloud Code of Conduct provides a standard which creates transparency not only on the individual cloud service, but it makes them comparable. So you can actually look at different offerings in the market, and you can see who is there from a compliance perspective, and it'll provide additional selection criteria. And as such, those standards will also have an impact, because they will set the bar they will create not only trust with respect to the individual service, but they'll create choice, and they'll influence by that matter everyone else who is not yet part of such a cloud code of conduct to think about whether they should not also invest there and become members, get their services compliant with that, and ultimately declare their adherence.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thanks, Matthias. And Corinne, I'd like to turn back to you now on one of the points Matthias mentioned there with regards to other European cloud projects such as Gaia X. And I wonder, in your opinion, how important is the success and the confidence that we place in agreements such as the EU Cloud Code of Conduct in the future success and the longevity of other European cloud projects such as Gaia X?
Yeah, so we're a member of Gaia X as well since day one. And to be honest, I feel Gaia X is really a framework. It's not a code. You know, it's much more a framework for all the providers to understand how we're going to operate. But it's not only around data privacy. There is a lot of things around Gaia X. So for me, the code is for the moment is very practical. We needed the code so then any company can compare those services and have one standard they can refer to, whatever their size, if they're a public or private company. So I think the code is clearly an element that will make Gaia X even more successful. It will have some rules that everybody understands that people can adopt and sign off, and then Gaia X can much broader topics. So I feel it was very important, as we said, that we managed to have this standardized way to look at our services and as well to map GDPR with cloud regulation. For us, so, I would say, and I don't want to say anything about Gaia X because I think we're at a very early stage of Gaia X. I don't know what Mike think about it, but I think we need to understand a bit more how far we're going to go with Gaia X. I think the code may accelerate Gaia X project as well by putting some very restricted rules and code in it.
Absolutely, and it'll be interesting to explore perhaps in the future the complementarity between the code itself and other EU cloud initiatives. When we're thinking about the future, Peter, I wonder if you envisage any fine-tuning as part of the code and any challenges that may arise as part of the ongoing evolution of the code itself. Is it something that you expect to evolve over time, over the long period, in the short period? Of course, we're aware of this modular approach to adding various parts to the code in the changing landscape of the cloud ecosystem. But how important is this fine-tuning process in the future? Peter?
Well, I think it is very important to have a look on the experiences with that code. So we are at the starting point now. The code is approved by the Belgian DPA, and now we have to see how it works in reality. So the reality proof is ahead, and after a few years, I think at least we have to look at the specific mechanisms, for example, for complaints handling. Does it really work? Are there shortcomings? How today we have set up a framework. There will be an organization that implements this framework, but we do not know really how it will be practiced. So this would be the next step, and then we also have to come to an assessment how the cooperation between the DPAs and the code, or those who the Scope Europe and the companies who have joined the code really functions. So whether it helps in reality to demonstrate a better understanding of and implementing of the data protection rules. One of the main challenges from my side is to understand the relation between this code that is focused on a specific service and the international data transfer dilemma. So it is not, from my understanding, the code does not provide a legal ground for transferring data to other countries which are not approved as adequate. So by an adequacy decision by the Commission. So the code may be an element for demonstrate the adequacy of data protection, but it does not provide the DPAs with that every company that joined the code has implemented adequate data protection mechanisms. So there might be a need for companies to have standard contractual clauses as well as the code. So there might be an interrelation between a BCR and the code. So so this understanding has to grow. So we have all to learn how it works and how it should work.
Thank you, Peter, for your comments. Really interesting point there. I wonder if I could bring in Natalie Ray to respond to this point as well with regards to how the code would function in the prism of ongoing adequacy decisions from the EU with other jurisdictions worldwide. Natalie, do you think the code has a role to play here?
Yeah, well, this is a code in line with Article 28 to demonstrate compliance with these processor elements. Now, international data transfers is a whole different animal. The code is definitely helpful because it creates a baseline understanding. So as has been said before, major cloud providers typically have been relying on international standards like ISO 27001, 17, 18, and the like, to demonstrate commitment to world-class privacy and security. Now, these codes creates a bridge between that and GDPR with a mapping and serves as a foundation. Now, in addition to that, and this is something that we have as both as a challenge and an opportunity, there is a module that is being worked on in order to address international data transfers under Article 46. So I think that's an excellent opportunity for cloud industry to work together with data protection authorities on the solutions to ensure adequate protections when it comes to international data transfer. What are the organizational measures that are expected? What are the technical measures? What are the contractual measures? How do we align that with the recommendations from the European Data Protection Board that, as we know, are now in draft, are not final, and we're expecting that to be around June. But I think it's going to be a tremendously valuable and interesting exercise to compile that together. I hope that it doesn't take 9 years to get there. We have the experience, we have the brilliant coordination and management and experience of scope. We have a track record of having been collaborating. So hopefully we can get there sooner. It's not going to be easier, but I think it can be done. It will bring a ton of value. We are at a time in which finding durable and credible data transfer mechanism is not important but urgent, and we can do a lot as industry.
Okay, thanks for your comments there in response to the question on international data transfers and future adequacy decisions there, Natalie. And I'd like to draw in a question from the audience now, just before we close up for the morning, because we've got about 5 minutes left. And we have a question here from Henrik Perls, who asks about the code in the context of other similar codes currently being worked on and presented. And Henrik asks, what is your view on the other codes of conduct, i.e. CISPAs, that are in the playing field, which also claim to cover the EU data protection regulations? Who and what sets them aside from the EU Cloud Code of Conduct at the current time? And perhaps this is one for Matthias. Would you like to take this one on board if there's no one else?
Okay, I can give it a try, and others can chime in. So first of all, as I mentioned before, the EU Cloud Code of Conduct is now the first in the market. As such, it sets a precedence, and it's very, very broad. And I would also say that its rules that have been put together, the controls, they are also quite challenging. So we've tried to set a high level of compliance, and that, I think, if you take my personal opinion, is something that you do not see at the same level on the other codes of conduct. But that can be a personal opinion on that. As such, we will have to wait and see. They are still under development, and I can only say the more alternatives we get, the better it's ultimately going to be. And I wish other initiatives a lot of luck if we can make this precedent that we are setting here something that will set a trend for resolving questions that we have in this industry, but also in other industries. We've also reached one of the goals of this initiative.
I can also, if I may add a comment there, I fully agree that the more transparency and accountability tools that help create trust in the market, the better. I can speak for, I am aware that the Cloud Security Alliance is also in the development of a code of conduct that Google Cloud has been supporting also for a long time. At the end of the day, I think it's not incompatible. We comply with SOC and also with ISO and with C5 and with many of them overlap in many ways on physical security and logical security. So I think it's beneficial for the cloud industry, everything that brings confident legal certainty and trust. So I think that is the key aspect, that, you know, all will have like these elements of, you know, being like very clear into the value they add, have the elements that they need to have in order to serve as a compliance tool. But in general, I would think that this is a positive thing. And as has been said many times in this event before, this one can be a role model in terms of how the collaboration worked and how the approval got done.
Wonderful. Thank you, Natalie, for your comments there. We are rapidly running out of time, I'm afraid. But just before we close up for a short lunch break, I'd like to go back to our panelists and ask them to deliver perhaps a short 30-second closing statement summarising their main points as part of this panel. And perhaps to kick us off, we can turn back to Peter Shah, former German Federal Commissioner for data protection. Peter.
Well, we are now at the starting point of a new era, I think, and this is an era of interaction between independent oversight and self-regulation, and you can also say regulated self-regulation, and we will see whether this will help to find a common understanding, not only in Europe, but also in other parts of the world, which requirements have been met and how they can be met.
Okay, thank you very much, Peter, for your closing remarks there. Barbara Cosgrove from Workday, we'd like to hear your closing statement, please.
Sure. Again, reiterating what everybody else has said, we're just thrilled to be here and to have this get over the finish line and to have it be the first code that's approved, and really looking forward to continuing to work on that third country transfer module. I think that really is the next step, is looking at how we can also develop that module that'll accompany this code and to enable data transfers to continue. So looking forward to continuing to work on that, and hopefully we'll see that take much less time, as everybody's noted.
Thanks for joining us here this morning, Barbara. And yes, a lot more in store with regards to that third country transfer module, of which work is currently well underway. Joe Copping, at Salesforce. We'd like to hear your closing statement, please.
Sure. Again, just to echo what everyone said, it's a huge achievement getting to where we are today, and the code really does enhance trust and transparency and ensures really high standards of data protection throughout Europe. So we're very excited to be involved.
Thanks, Joe. I'd now like to turn to Corinne Pickard from Oracle.
Yeah, it's a big achievement, and I would say it's a big success for all of our EU member country and for all the company after this sanitary crisis we just went through, that want to transform and digitize their services and need more and more guidance around transparency and data privacy. So I feel it's really the right moment, because there will be a strong acceleration of digital transformation across the board. We're not going to leave behind the small, medium business that don't have the resources of the large enterprise. So I feel in the context of this economic, rebound that we all need in Europe, this code is a very good sign that we care about the company and their future, and we want to help them in their journey of modernization.
Great, thanks for joining us here this morning, Corinne. Natalie Ray from Google Cloud, can we hear your closing remarks, please?
Big thank you and big congratulations to everyone. As Google Cloud, extremely proud and happy to having been one of the early supporters and adopters of the code with more than 100 services. We're very much looking forward to seeing the success of the code on the ground, and look forward to the next chapter around international data transfers.
Great, thanks for your time this morning, Natalie. And finally, Matthias Salarius at SAP. We'd like to hear your closing statement, please.
Yeah, thank you. So this is an historic moment. We have made it with the Lighthouse project over the finish line, with the potential to transform the industry. And I would like to pick up where Peter Shah left off. It's now on us to actually fill it with life, to make sure that it really, that all of the merits that it's received today are actually going to turn into reality, and that we that we now show that we can comply, and that we continue working on the code and keeping it relevant, not only for now but for the future. That's my wish, and that's my sincere commitment on behalf of SAP.
Wonderful. Thank you very much indeed, Matthias, for joining us as part of this really engaging and dynamic discussion this morning. Well, we've certainly got quite a lot to chew over during the short lunch break. A big thank you to all of our participants, speakers and panelists who have been very gracious with their time this morning. Please do stick around though for a series of workshops after the break. At 1 p.m, we'll be covering the code's membership, benefits and marketing aspects. Then at 2, we'll focus on governance, monitoring and the regulator's perspective. And finally, at 3 p.m, we'll be wrapping up with a final workshop on data transfers and other additional modules to the code, of which hopefully this very engaging subject of third country transfers will come up as well. Please make sure to tune in to these insightful sessions coming up this afternoon. That's all from me for this morning, though. Enjoy the short break, and we shall see you again shortly.